Kia ora. Welcome. No mai haere mai. It's great to have everybody here to the OANZ webinar series. And today we're talking all about transitioning, how to move to organic. And we've got three great people who are on the ground, well experienced in that. But I always start just with a bit of housekeeping, the outline of the session. We just do some quick introductions, and then there's some questions that we're going to be asking the panel. And then there's a Q&A, and that's your chance to ask some questions. And the Q&A is, if you're not familiar, is at the bottom of the screen. The Q&A with a big question mark. Press that, write your question, and Lou will pick that up. And then we have the last sort of 20, 25 minutes where it's quite audience engaged, and we work with that. But first, just thanks a lot for all the speakers today are part of the Organic Dairy Pasture Group, ODPG, which is one of the key sponsors for OANZ and its gene tech work. And also Maha Karuna, which is the other sponsor working with us. And we're very purposefully targeted and working with the pastoral sector this year, and really understanding what that means for the New Zealand, for the pastoral sector, because it is our dominant land use here. So today we have Rachel Short, Jesiah Alexandra, and Willie White on here, and I'm going to ask them all a question I ask everybody, and that: what makes you tick? What drives you? What motivates you? 1 minute each, and I'll start with Rachel.
Hi everyone. I suppose what makes me tick is this really. Just learning, connecting, growing with other organic farmers, connecting with our land, connecting with our animals, connecting with other people in the wider sector, in a really positive way. So yeah, I guess that's me.
Awesome. Jesiah.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so for me, it was all about digging holes on the farm and just the biology aspect of organics. I love connecting with people as well, but I'm a bit of a homebody, and planting trees and seeing the diversity and biology change in my soil structures over time just gets me so excited.
Great. Jesiah. And Willie.
Yeah, so same as the others, but also probably the big thing that makes me tick is trying to dispel the myths around financial viability in particular, going down a track of, treating the land and everything better. I think there's a perception out there that you have to kind of sacrifice financially in order to do the right thing by your soils and all the rest of it. And I guess what makes me tick is trying to prove that that's not the case. In fact, you can have far more sustainable and higher returns doing it the right way.
Awesome, Willie. Well, that's a good segue in, because the session is a bit about myth busting. So everybody on the call here is certified, and there's people's experiences of getting certified are quite different, but there are similarities. So Willie, I'd like you to kick us off with the first question: is what is the true cost of transitioning across to organic, and your experience, please?
So from my dairy farming context, there's actually it's all a net benefit, actually, funnily enough. But I think it was important to be driven, to have a clear vision around, what it meant financially to go down that path and why you wanted to do it. And I was, and while I'm philosophically completely in line with the organics and understand exactly why we have the standards we do and believe in those standards 100%. For me, it was envisaging the financial pathway, and in a lot of cases, and certainly for the average conventional dairy farm, there's a lot of the cost of production is really the biggest risk I see, and it was always our biggest issue is having a too high cost of production and having it sort of out of your control. You've got when a big part of your cost base is kind of synthetic fertilizers, which are subject to commodity trends globally, and imported feed costs, which you have no control over year to year. Those costs can get out of control and out of hand pretty quick. And so we found, well, the vision for us was always just to go back to a system one, all grass. And yeah, so when you take all those things into account, you actually end up dropping so much cost out of your business that even though you drop cow numbers and stuff to sort of get back to more closer to natural capacity, and therefore you sacrifice some output by doing that, the cost decreases we found outweighed that, and took a lot of risk out of the business. So yeah, so it's hard to say, but I mean, the real cost is, I guess, time, because you kind of have to relearn everything you thought you knew. I did an ag degree at Lincoln, and I sometimes have a chuckle, at what we thought we knew, back then. You've kind of got to throw it all out and relearn, and it's exciting. But yeah, it does, and it's actually really easy to do, because you're pretty excited by this stage at this new world that's been opened up to you. So it's not a hard thing to get stuff stuck into, but there's definitely, you do find yourself just wanting to learn more and more, read more and more, talk to more and more people. Socially and everything like that. I mean, it was it was all a benefit too, because we took a lot of the stress out of the farming system, and we took a lot of control back, and that always just flows through to staff and family and everything. So yeah, so in terms of the cost, there's a whole lot of, I guess, reappropriation of cost, because all of a sudden you're taking the things that you used to focus on in order to get some kind of marginal production or gain out of, was a switch around to focusing on getting a bit more diversity in our pastures, and yeah, just setting just a completely different I guess blueprint for what we were going for. But as I say to everyone, even with all of the introduction of seed and stuff that we did, it sort of paled in comparison to our previous cropping and regrassing program in terms of cost.
So Willie, do you have numbers that you share? Have you sort of done some analysis and have done some base setting of those costs and what they look like?
Yeah, so we started the transition sort of midway through the 2019-2020 season. So the last kind of full year of our old conventional system is that 2019 financial year. And so within 2 years, by that 22 year, we were running our farm costs, farm working expenses were 50% of what they were in 2019.
50%.
And everyone knows, what's happened since 2019. There's probably been 10% compounding increase on those costs because the large part of those costs is made up, with the synthetic fertilizer program and a lot of imported feed. So we know where those costs have gone. So, so I'd say if we were still running the same system, we'd be far less than 50% now. And our cost base has really been quite stable, even through the volatility that we've seen in the last few years. And, now like conventional cost structures now are sort of, probably into the 6-7s per kilo. So, they're lucky if they get the $10, then they sort of need that now, because the margin's actually only what it was, back when they had a $4 cost structure and a $6 or $7 payout. So we find that, now we've got that stable cost base. So now with the organics going really well and Fonterra doing a good job there, and we're starting to get a higher and higher return on our organic milk. Well, that's all just going straight to the bottom line. There's no like what there used to be. There's no kind of, a lot of that gets passed on through to the rest of the supply chain outside the farm gate.
Thanks, Willie. I'm going to bring just Rachel, maybe some quick comment from yourself, Rachel and Jesiah, around that topic of the cost of transitioning, whether that's the financial, the social, your experiences, please.
Yeah, I mean, like Willie said, it's all pretty much was a cost benefit for us. So I suppose I look at some people when they transition to organics, they came from quite a different sort of, a higher input system from essentially where I was. Like we were always a system one, self-contained farm. We were pretty close to organics before we actually converted. So I suppose we didn't have that extremity and conversion that some farmers have as well.
All right, Jesiah?
Yeah, I can definitely echo what Willie's saying. For me, it was as I seen the farm soil health start to transition, definitely that overflowed into the herd health. So my fertilizer costs started coming down. The farm was holding its own fertility a lot better, wasn't needing constant inputs, and the animal health was also improving at the same time. I was getting less cases of mastitis and, numerous other things. And it's not until you sort of sit back after a couple of years and start to see that your bottom line's just getting better and better, and all the costs above that are actually coming down. And it's quite surprising, but yeah, it's an awesome feeling.
Cool. We're going to come back to that, but we're going to move on to the next sort of set of questions. It's going to be Rachel's going to lead us with it, and I'd like you to talk about a key myth or two that's out there about transitioning to organic. Like because we're a myth busting session, so take us through a few, Rachel.
Oh, I've heard plenty of myths over the years, and anything. Willie's probably already just busted a few of those myths, because it's anything from you go woke, you go broke, to anything from mining the soils to comments around animal health to all sorts. So there's myths from all angles. Early on, just when we converted to organics, I was actually at a group and a presenter got up and it was all around environmental stuff. And they said, "Oh, we could all fix this environmental problems that we have here in New Zealand. We could all go organic, but the problem is if we all go organic, we all know that organic farmers can't grow grass and don't make milk. And if you don't make milk, you're not making any money. And if you're not making any money, you're not paying any tax. And if you're not paying any tax, some poor little old lady's missing out on a hip operation because of you. So I don't know how organic farmers sleep at night knowing that little old ladies are missing out on hip operations because of them." Which was just an absolute, like, I sort of laughed and wanted
Hang
to
on,
go
hang on. Is that real? Is that real? Is that example a real example, Rachel?
It is a real example from a farming group that I was at. The presenter got up and that's what he said. So, I would be quite happy to still send my tax bills to him to pay today, because I can tell you that there's no little old ladies missing out on hip operations because of me, and I'm sure that the others would agree. I mean, there's been a bit of information come out lately, around the profitability of organic farms in comparison with conventional farms, and the profitability per hectare on organic farms is higher. So, that's a big myth. There's a lot of myths. I know Jesiah's going to talk a bit more around soil health and stuff. You're mining your soils. You don't use this and you don't use that. People miss out on the word synthetic as well. In organic production, we don't use synthetic inputs, but people sort of, you don't use fertilizers and you don't use this, and we don't use synthetic fertilizers is actually the key word that's missing in a lot of those phrases that gets made, is another thing that I would say. So yeah, I've definitely heard a number of myths along the way.
Well, we do need to make quite a good list of those. I think that one's pretty good. I know. Okay, Jesiah, what's your experience about some myths? What are some key myths?
Yeah, well, I'd carrying on from what Rachel just said, we actually recently sold a dairy farm, and when you're doing the property information, you put down your total milk solids, and there was comments that, oh, the milk solids are a little bit low, and they were sort of questioning the profitability of the farm. And it's really interesting because when you're doing your property information for your real estate agent, you're not at all showing a budget with your bottom line where you're actually making really good money on a, say, lower milk solid system, because your costs have come down, your total ecosystem is just sort of completely humming on its own.
Cool. Okay. Well, I want to come back to that one. Willie, have you got a story to beat Rachel's?
No, I don't. I'd like to. I would have liked to have been there and told them that, like it was classic. In that 2023 financial year was a classic one because, it was the typical what usually happens with volatile sort of commodity market. They're coming off a high payout and into a significantly lower one. But of course, in a conventional system, your costs carry through, and particularly if it's the payout starts high and ends low for that season. They're those years that put a real big profit squeeze on the dairy system, and it would have been nice to have been able to say, well, through that year, organic farmers had a very minimal impact on their. In fact, they probably, I know a few guys locally that have said that's their best year they've ever had, because we didn't have the costs getting out of control, and of course we're producing a niche product which didn't fall back as much as the commodity price. So in that year, you'd have to say that the organic farmers were actually subsidising the tax, the hip operation,
or hip replacements
on behalf of the conventional guys.
Hey, but there is a question. One of the things I'd like to bring up on this transitioning thing, which is quite well recorded, going from 0 to 3 years, there is a change required, which does affect farms, right? Do you just briefly want to talk about your experience of that transition period rather than, here we are, fully organic, smelling the roses, everything's great, helping a lot of old ladies get hip replacements. What about this 3 years? What's some of the myths in that 3-year transition, and maybe a fact or two that you've experienced?
We definitely noticed our farm had a very initial lull in our pasture growth, and through the support groups around organics, we kind of were prepared for that, so we carried a little bit more silage into that season, and it got us through perfectly fine. But as the farm, sort of, if you were to compare it to a bodybuilder on steroids, what do they look like when they come off steroids? Well, if the farm's been constantly dependent on synthetic inputs, there's going to be like a withdrawal phase that the farm has to go through. And so we noticed that on our farm. And then once, I mean, you could probably continue with this drug analogy, which is great. Once you go to rehab and you get cleaned up, it's only up from there. You've started at the bottom, so you can only get better. So we had a lull on this farm. Once the ecosystems got really working, soil fertility started to sort itself out and be a more, closed ecosystem looking after its own. Then we just seen leaps and bounds in grass growth and pasture health. But yeah, that was not so much a myth, but a fact. We did see a slight lull, and it was good to be prepared for that.
Good. So you were prepared and you had support. That's the key thing, and that's part of
what we'd been given a heads up
right?
that could happen.
Yeah.
We'd given a heads up. We carried a bit more extra silage for that year, and in that way we just had plenty on tap for if the spring pinch lasted a little bit longer than we were anticipating. We had enough supplement to sort of bridge that gap.
Okay, I've got a yes/no question for everyone. Going organic, have you reconnected with your farm better? Is there more of a connection with your farm?
Yes.
We're first generation, so I wasn't disconnected, but yeah, I do feel connected.
Rachel?
Yes, and I would say it's actually connecting with the underground as well. I know as a conventional farmer, a lot of my farming was completely above the ground farming, you farmed from the ground up. Whereas, converting to organics, that was probably the absolute biggest change. All of a sudden you started, looking at the soil biology, the full ecosystem, what's happening underneath the ground. So that's, and it's probably what you're asking before, like even around the conversion time. Like you first start looking at converting to organic, some of it, sometimes you can kind of sort of like start thinking as a replacer, for an example, what am I going to replace my synthetic fertilizer with? Whereas instead of you shouldn't be thinking as a replacer, you're changing the whole system more into an ecological, regenerative, biological sort of soil system. So yes, definitely, definitely more connected and that below the ground stuff as well.
Cool. Willie?
Yeah, I mean, just carrying on from Rachel, really. I mean, most people, even conventionally, would probably acknowledge that the most important asset they have on their farm is their soil. But prior to going down this track, we didn't have a relationship with our soil. We got a worthless soil test every year, and most of the time that told you that everything was fine. So just keep doing what you've been doing.
All right, froze a little bit there, Willie. We're going to move on to the next question.
Oh, if I could just chime in on what Rachel said, Brendan.
Holes that you really.
Sorry, Willie, you froze there, man. So we just left you frozen and went across to Jesiah. So, Jesiah?
Yeah, just something that came to mind was that the Band-Aid approach really doesn't work in organics. If you think you're going to be able to use the exact template and operation system from a conventional farm and replicate that organically just using a replacement system, it doesn't really work like that. You've really got to look at it from a whole new point of view, understand ecosystems better, and that's when you need to be able to connect with organic support groups to understand what are my options. Just trying to play the replacement game and just using Band-Aids everywhere, it won't last. It doesn't work long term.
Yeah, and I think it was something that Willie said around the low stress and understanding the total health is a really important concept. And obviously, we all know in our own lives that low stress leads to much better health. Okay. Question to you, Jesiah, to lead us off on is what would you tell your best friend to do if they were going organic in terms of key lessons learned?
So just to be like nitty gritty for us, when we came to this farm, it was 40 hectares, and then we acquired another 20 hectares, and then we acquired another 20 hectares. So our conversion period got lengthened, and every time we did that, we needed more cows, and it was actually quite tough to just bring in really good quality cows. The organic sector is smaller, so your cow pool is a bit smaller to choose from. What I wish I had have done was, if I knew my farm size was, this size and I need this many cows, was sort of get my herd sorted. Get a really good herd that you're happy with, the genetics that you want to follow, that they've got the componentries that you like. Get that sorted, because once that herd converts to organics, that's who you've got. And to just easily go down to the sale yards and buy a nice line of heifers because you need a bit of a top up or you want to drop out some rubbish. It's not that easy in the organic sector. So get the herd sorted. Another thing that I learned later, and once we were certified, and I wish I had have addressed before we converted, was we had some areas on the farm that had really bad blackberry. So just weeds in general. And I wish I had have addressed that before we started our conversion, rather than looking at it and thinking, oh, I'll muscle it out and I'll beat it. Because the reality is I had to eat humble pie and decertified an area of the farm, attacked it with some chemical warfare, and now I can get back on top of it with some muscle. But yeah, just identifying them early, get them sorted. That would be, if I could go back and tell myself, I'd definitely change that. Yeah, and the other thing was fencing as well. Like, there's some rules around organics that we can't use tantalized posts, the treated wooden posts. We've got some great alternatives now with plastic posts and hardwoods and steel waratahs, but but maybe your yards need a better race, or you just wanted that triangle paddock with the cows all bunched up in a corner. Get that kind of thing sorted, before your conversion. And that was also another lesson I learned was through the support groups, I found out that you can use tantalized wood through your conversion period. And at the time, our auditor's interpretation was that you couldn't use any tantalized wood once you started conversion. So luckily, going through a support group, we found out we could be using tantalized wood, and we quickly got our farm sorted using some cheaper materials like wood and post. We quickly got them sorted before we finished our conversion. But had we not been plugged in with the support group, we wouldn't have known, and we would have just constantly sort of dealt with the fact that we never got the fencing perfect before going organic. So those would be my three main.
Cool.
Sort of, if I could tell myself, 9 years ago, hey, do all this before you start conversion, that would definitely be the three things.
So some good planning and a good support group, and get it right from the beginning. I think that genetic one is really cool too. Willie, any kind of, what would your key lessons?
Yeah, for me, it'd probably be like leave the production kind of ego at the door. Start focusing on return on capital. That's really the only thing that you can compare yourself with anyone else on. And so I think that would be the biggest thing. You got to be prepared to drop back to a natural level of production. And for a lot of systems, that's a long way, but it's all about profit as opposed to production. The other thing was, like, I definitely get all the arguments about sort of setting things up and stuff like that, but I witnessed before we sort of took the plunge, it was the ones that committed to the organic program, early on. They could just see that they were going to be farming in a way that wasn't far from it. So you may as well start it, because it does take 3 years, and you sort of kick yourself if you don't get it underway. But I just found that was really good to focus on what you needed to do. You just had a framework to work within. You couldn't, get cold feet and get out of it. You sort of had to just focus on doing what, the basics right, and really focusing on your farm and getting it, improving it and all the rest of it. I just think it was good for focusing on what you needed to do, just getting that commitment to that organic program going.
Yeah. Commitment. Good. Rachel.
I guess like the connection with other people is huge, and like I know here in coastal Taranaki we had a good number of farmers convert to organic in the early 2000s. So when we started in 2015, like it was there was already a good network. But what I'd like to say, like, because I know obviously with the South Islanders and stuff coming on, like they're not going to have a farmer who's been supplying Fonterra already and certified just down the road. Like, we were fortunate to have a few of them. But just really those networks are still out there. We're all up here in the North Island. People, there's always a lot of worry around animals and animal health and that sort of stuff. Just get out there, network. People have been doing this for years now. There's a lot of answers out there. That connection is huge. And just like Willie just said, leave that production ego out the gate. And Jesiah mentioned earlier on, like with the sale of the farm, with the real estate agent, I always find some of that, even like production per hectare and stuff, like such an interesting conversation, because when you're farming a self-contained farm, like a System 1, that you're not buying in any feed, that is your true production per hectare, because all your feed is growing on your land. So if you're buying in a whole lot of feed from elsewhere to grow your production per hectare, you're actually utilising land from elsewhere. So it's not even a comparing apples with apples figure, because actually, if you're in a self-contained system, you're not utilising land from elsewhere to bump up that production per hectare. So it's been mentioned enough times today.
Yeah, well, that is a very dominant thing, isn't it? The growth. gross, how big you are, how much horsepower your tractor has. And I am amazed because you wouldn't buy a business purely off the gross. You would be looking at the net, right? I mean, if you were serious about, if you were really
But like,
serious, worried about the net, not about how much it is. But I look from that, we're going to move on a little bit, just conscious of the time. But eating humble pie, Jesiah, and what's been consistently talked about is that ego around production. And I do think the living system of an organic system is about staying in the unknown, right? So it's constantly sort of learning and having a network to learn from and asking questions and not being a know-all, but truly being in that space of asking lots of questions. Cool. Quick yes, no, and then we're going to move on. Gene tech bill, yes or no?
no.
No.
Is that a common theme of those you talk about? Jesiah, what were you going to come in on?
So I was part of the panel that spoke with the Waikato Council when they first looked at doing a trial run here in Hamilton. And it was really interesting. One of the other panelists had such a great topic, such a great point, because at the time there was the fires over in Australia, and we were actually seeing the smoke and ash floating in the sky across New Zealand at the time. And he said, so these gene tech, this is from a grass point of view. He said these green tech companies are saying that we can contain the trial, we can contain this grass hybrid, whatever the heck you want to call it, and it's going to stay within the fence. And yet at the same time, I can see smoke blowing all the way from Australia. So how can you realistically tell me you're going to keep your finger on this thing and keep the trial inside the fence? And so I feel like it's the same thing with gene tech. It's like they'll tell us that it's all good and we're going to have it under control, but the reality is they're just chasing money, and they just want the opportunity to give this a go. They don't care about the long-term consequence.
Cool. All right, we're going to hold it there. And Lou, we've got some questions in the Q&A. They're starting to come in. So people, if you've got questions of what's been heard, there's 5 or 6 in there now. The chat, just to be clear about the chat, if you want to engage with one another, post up a website or an article that's interesting or a notice that goes in the chat, but specific questions to the panel goes in the Q&A. Lou, do you want to take us through a couple, please?
Yeah, I've actually got a bunch of questions from the registration sign-up form I want to run through as well, because I think we've got a bunch of students in from the Technology Institute in Taranaki, and they were asking, what advice would you give my organic L4 students? And the second question was, and is this also regenerative farming? So it might be good to kind of clear up. There's some good comments in the chat about that as well. To the panel. Rachel?
Yeah, I suppose some of those, that first question was probably somewhat answered around what advice would you give to a friend that we've just sort of answered.
Yep.
And the other one that you asked around is this regenerative farming as well. I suppose I mentioned before, like, when we were talking about conversion, like, and you start to go, oh, what am I going to replace this fertilizer with to another fertilizer, or examples of, replacing inputs. Versus that getting right into like an ecological, regenerative, biological system, working with your soils and all the rest of it. So yes, somewhat there's a crossover, but if at the end of the day, you probably can farm organically and tick all the boxes without doing a lot, just by removing a lot of stuff. Whereas if you really want to thrive, you want to get along and really be working with your soils and in a regenerative organic model.
Right.
Jesiah, Willie, anything to add?
No, spot on, Rachel.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd just say like the organic standards are made, to produce, for regenerative results. I mean, and obviously if everything can get captured and all the rest of it, but ultimately there's a pretty good reason why you can and can't do stuff in organics, and it's to do with what does help or hinder a pathway to a more regenerative system. So and also, for those students, like, get out and, like, we all still need people, in our businesses and stuff like that. And anyone that's coming along that's initially got an interest in organics or whatever it may be, or regenerative farming, they're always going to be pretty welcome to come and catch up with any of us, and there'll always be opportunities in the future. So get out on as many farms as you can and talk to as many farmers as there are, and there'll be good opportunities coming.
That's great advice, Willie. And Organic Dairy and Pastoral Group, they have plenty of field days that people can pop along to as well to go and meet the farmers and see what it's like in the paddock themselves. I've got a specific question, so maybe this might be good for you, Willie. Controlling weeds, mastitis, lame feet, and drought would be my worry. How did you guys transition to dealing with these things from the beginning? Now, I know actually Jesiah has touched on that a little bit, so maybe if Willie or Rachel could follow up.
It's one of those things. Your whole system becomes healthier, and those problems become less than what they were. And people get worried about, how do you treat those problems? Well, there's any number of organic certified alternatives to penicillin, and my question back to those people is, what are they doing about their animal health? Because we know that penicillin or antibiotics are losing efficacy pretty quickly. Chemical drenches are also, there's a big problem with resistance now. So in a way, if everyone's really honest with themselves in New Zealand pastoral systems, they're all going to have to start thinking a bit more like an organic farmer to overcome those problems. And we just found that they're always things that you think about the most going into it, but they become the least of your worries as you go through it. A lot of preventative focus and all the rest of it, which just ends up working well. And
Okay, thank you. We've got Caroline in the audience from an organic organisation in Australia, and she's keen to know if any farmers have done side-by-side comparison of conventional to organic across different commodity groups. Do we know of any such thing? Maybe if anybody knows in the chat, you can drop any info in the chat. Now, I know Aligned Farms are doing a side-by-side on regenerative and conventional, so I can maybe post some info about that later.
Hey Lou, I'm just going to pick up a really quick one that
Yep.
I think I meant to do earlier that has been asked by Leanne Mackey. Is certified with whom, Jesiah?
BioGrow.
Rachel?
Assure quality.
Willie?
BioGrow.
Cool.
Okay, I'm just going to go into our Q&A now. We've got a few things in there. We've got Morris asking, how important to you are support farms, and are you passing on premiums to them? And one of the limiting factors in the South Island is the lack of support farms. Now, I'm not sure what that means by support farms. So maybe, Morris, if you could outline that a bit more. Anybody else know what that term means?
Maybe heifer grazing and silage?
Yeah, grazing.
Right. Okay.
I think it's important. I mean, I would always, going back to what would you do, probably is have a system where you can be self-contained at the scale that you want as well. I think it's important to have control over that, but obviously that's not always available. So yeah, I mean, I think the availability of support farms is important. I think the problem is as well, certainly up in the North Island, is that organic farmers pretty soon see the value of having full control themselves. So even if they need cow grazing, winter grazing 1 year or supplement 1 year, they're pretty quickly trying to get themselves self-sufficient as well. So it can be fickle as well as to whether people continue to need those services. But I think down south where Morris is probably it's probably going to be quite an interesting thing. I know that's certainly been a lot of talk about down there, is where are we going to get our hay for bale grazing and stuff like that from. So yeah, I think it's definitely something to think about as well.
I think, I mean, I've always been self-contained, but I mean, it's quite common. You sort of hear, try and take your grazier on your journey with you. If you're grazing your young stock out, see if you can get them to come on the journey with you. down south, like, is there, I've spoken to a couple of organic sheep and beef guys from the South Island saying, how can we support the dairy guys that are wanting to come on board? So, there's opportunity out there if you get amongst the right people.
Thanks, Rachel.
I think, and then also from the passing the premiums on, just from talking with other like support blocks, heifer grazing and say silage suppliers, they are generally asking a premium. I know of one farm that's asking $1 per head per week premium over just conventional heifer grazing rates, and generally a bale of silage might be $5 or $10 more expensive. And you got to realize that they've got some certification costs they need to cover, so you can't really argue with it. But yeah, so the premiums do get passed on when needed.
I think most organic farmers are happy to pay that premium too, because they know they're getting, generally speaking, they're getting product or grazing or whatever it is from a farmer that's running the similar philosophy. So that, and like it's just interesting. Like one of the things that someone said before, what about drought was one of them. And I mean, we've never been more mitigated against drought under this system than what we ever were. We used to kick our ass in a conventional system because you're just too highly stocked and all the rest of it, and it goes downhill really quick. Whereas now with different grazing management and just a far lower intensity in the system, that's where you build up your resilience to drought, I believe.
Hey, Willie, just thinking about that for a second. Another question we had was there's been some pretty shocking weather events over the last few years here. To all of the panelists, has your farm been hit, and has organic farming improved farm resilience? And if so, how?
I
can
comment on the flooding. Oh, sorry, Willie, you go first.
Oh, yeah. So, I did talk about this the other day somewhere. So obviously Gabriel hit us, reasonably hard. And we certainly had some infrastructural, damage, and, certainly there's still things that I see that kind of need to be fixed up permanently from that. So there was some cost involved with all that, but as far as its impact on our, just our standard year of production and profit, it had minimal impact. And to me, that was real good proof as well that our system was able to cope with those external things a lot better. Because that year was
some of that resilience. Can you give us some details, Willie, on that? Like, just give us a couple of real examples and of others. Like, what did you observe?
Oh, like it was just kind of a business. I mean, it was a terrible sort of summer to farming because it wasn't just Gabriel. We just had excessive rain really all year. And yeah, I mean, we would have definitely had more damage done through that year and stuff like that, and that would have flown through the following year. But just in terms of
we're losing you, Willie.
He's frozen. We're talking about resilience, Rachel and Jesiah. Like, what
financial
did
impact
you notice in the system? Sorry, Willie, you froze again, mate. So we took it across.
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit about so we're a clay-based farm here, and early on the farm was just always saturated wet, heaps of pugging in winter and things like that. And as we've noticed the topsoil improving and growing in quantity, our farm has become more free draining. The introduction of more earthworms in our farm is creating, a more aerobic environment. So again, we're getting better drainage. And then equally, when a paddock does get damaged from wet weather, it bounces back so much quicker because you've got biology working underneath fixing that damage versus you having to go in there with some sort of tillage machine to right it. So the resilience aspect is like it's all working for you underground. You've got a whole bunch of mini workers straight away as soon as there's whether it's a drought or it's a flood, you just see the farm bounce back that little bit quicker because it's actually alive. It's actually working underneath. It's not a sterile dirt that's going to require sort of your physical input to correct anything. But we've definitely noticed a difference. We had a really wet couple of years from Gabriel, and even just recent crazy events that just happened out of the blue. Our roadside paddocks used to go underwater, at least twice a year, and of the last couple of years, which have been some of the wettest, our roadside paddocks have never had sitting water in them anymore. And I haven't actually cleaned the drains out like I probably should have. But yeah, it's just all the soil just soaks it up and deals with it better.
Rachel?
I'd absolutely agree with what Jesiah just said, because living on the coast, like, it was always about drought resistance and stuff. But one of the big things that we hadn't even really thought about so much until we got on the journey was around that soil, like the water infiltration rates and stuff. And like, you just, any rain events or anything that we get, the soils can handle it so much better now than what they ever could before. So whereas we were sort of thinking, drought mitigation more than actually thinking so much about the winter, but it's a breeze to get through the winter now. And like, we had a really dry late summer, autumn last year here in Taranaki. And you start to think, then it was still challenging and it was still dry. But I remember having our soil consultant come on farm at the end of March and saying, nothing's dead, it's just dry, and just how quickly we bounce back when those autumn rains come was incredible.
Oh. Lou, is there any other pressing questions? We've got time for another 2 or 3.
Yep. Jamie Tucker's asking, if we look at a scenario where the organic dairy premium fails or falls, possibly to non-organic farm gate prices, how would that affect your profitability?
I can start. Obviously it's have an impact on profitability, but same thing, because we're generally farming with far lower cost structure. It's going to have less impact on us than what a similar fall in commodities would have had on our old business. But I actually made a point before we did it that I was really determined that we had a more robust business before any organic premium. So I was always big on making sure that's the right thing for your business, regardless of organic premium. The premium's a bit of a bonus, and we've definitely been able to demonstrate that as well. So we're still better off because we've got a lower cost system which has less risk in it. Yeah,
better business model.
Yep.
Rachel?
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. Like, obviously being with the organic program with Fonterra, we've got a higher payout. But if that was to disappear tomorrow, hopefully it never will. But when you're farming with those values for an organic farming system, and like Willie says, and you've got a lower cost structure and all the rest of it, you're still going to be better off, even if you did have to flick back to that conventional milk price.
Another question there, Lou, or if you wanted to chip in there, Jesiah?
No, I just echo what they said. It's just, exactly.
Leanne Mackey's asking, Willie, what's natural production mean? I think you were a bit earlier.
It's a bit like what Rachel was saying. Like it's the production you can get on your farm from pasture, without any external input.
Okay, thank you. And we've got a few questions from Carolyn. When organic dairy farmers are applying for finance for dairy land, do the banks accept your contracted organic price, or do they use the conventional price, and does this impact your borrowing capacity? Is that?
I already owned my land. Willie might have the answer for that.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, they've all got different policy probably, but I think our bank was working on a $2, a plus $2, so conventional plus $2. Then some of them just, I think they work it out, but yeah, it's not based on conventional for most banks now. I think there's enough of us out there that they, and they're actually all quite keen on getting into it. It sort of ticks a lot of their boxes
Okay.
as well. Right.
So, Willie, I'm just going to bring in here and to bring up your past. You come from a rural banking background, right? And there was a period when organic farms were very difficult to get loans because they were organic, and things have changed, and now banks have other criteria they have to meet for a social license. What's your experience in the whole financing world with this? So I think it's a really important question for everyone.
Yeah, I think first thing to say is like I'm really appreciative of the kind of pioneering organic industry in this country. And I think we came in and did the easy bit really, where we took all the lessons that they learned over 20, 30 years or whatever, and took the refined system and worked with that. So it was a bit more seamless for us. But yeah, I mean, I've had, we've got and like a lot of other organic guys around, we've got a lot of debt. So the way I look at it now is that with the system that we're running, I just sleep a lot better with a lot higher debt loading than what we did have. But we're also involved with another company that's just trying to get some large scale investor fund effectively to convert to organic dairy. And all of the banks have been, they're just sitting there ready to go really. So they're all keen to be a part of it, because at the end of the day, they're about cash and profit as well. So
Great.
I've got one more question.
Sorry, Lou, I was just interested in others, one about the finance and the banking, as others' experiences. None?
We already owned our farms before we converted to organics, but I mean, we get nothing but support from our bank. It's never been any sort of an issue, and it's more profitable than if we were conventional. So
yeah, we've never had any. We've never had the need for any big. Like the banks have always just used the figure that Fonterra's offer us at the time. I think they see the organic program now just as reflective as like a winter contract would be, so they're going to use that price.
Great. Sorry, Lou. Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask this question because obviously Organics Aotearoa are campaigning at the moment against the GM bill. So I want to ask, how will any organic farmers manage the risk of GM or chemical trespass from conventional to organics? So if the farm next door pops up and they're spraying or they've got GM seed, how will you mitigate this? Anyone?
We'll stop it from happening before it becomes a thing.
Yes.
Go on Neighbours at War, that TV show. Well, I mean, you've got setbacks, and one thing we planted on our farm was basically we planted our boundary out. Was the first thing we planted. Not because I was worried about that, but it's just a good way to ring fence your farm from prevailing winds to drying the place out. But also if you were trying to stop overspray or GM crops and things like that. So that was plant something that's good fodder for the cows, fast growing, and provides you that sort of shelter, that ring fence.
Cool.
I'd probably just keep trying to have a good relationship that we try and have in the community and with our neighbours and stuff, and probably let them know that there could be implications for that, and most people probably be respectful of that as well.
We've had a great relationship with our neighbour. He often will plant maize on our boundary, and he'll have the truck there at 4 o'clock in the morning spraying the paddocks out so that there's no wind drift and that. Like, you have a good relationship with your neighbour, and they respect what you're doing. It all works out.
Yeah, we're all still part of some really cool rural communities and stuff that we with good neighbours, and you still all want to be part of it. But when it comes to GM, I think it's not over yet. We've just got to keep fighting it so that it doesn't happen to start with.
Now, Lou, I'm just gonna we'll wind the questions up there. I'm conscious of the time, and we give
one more.
We got okay.
You're all members of the Organic Dairy and Pastoral Group in New Zealand. So what are the biggest benefits of joining this farmer-to-farmer network?
I suppose we touched on it quite a bit over the past hour around just that connection with others, learning from others, just a really good network of people. I mean, some of them have been, you've got a range of people that have been farming organically for years, right through to those that are in conversion, to commercial members that can help out with different things. So, yeah, it's just that, that really good network of people.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to send out some information afterwards with the recording about the group and how to join and some events that are coming up too, if you're interested.
Willie?
Just to echo that. I mean, there's a whole new community that opens up to you when you go down this track that you didn't even know that was there, and any network or opportunity to meet more people and stuff has got great value. So yeah, I'd just say that.
Definitely is confidence inspiring as well when you get to go to someone's farm, see these principles in practice. And, the amount of times I'd take this little notebook and just be scribbling down all the questions and answers that were coming out. It's just really great. But also the online platform as well. You might have an issue crop up and you can fire through a question or an email to someone and you might get 3 or 4 answers within an hour, which is just great. So, really good value.
Great continual learning community. Right, last thing, each of you, final comment that you want to make that you really hasn't been touched on, or a thought you've had listening to others. I got a question for you then. Do you reckon New Zealand could be organic?
No.
Nah.
Nah, you don't force it on people. It's got to be, you got to have the right values.
You got to love it in your heart to do it.
Yeah.
If you're just chasing a dollar.
I talk about this with my sister a lot, actually, and I do believe that it is possible. Everyone thinks that it would flood the market, but I don't think we produce enough to do that. And I actually, I mean, it's probably a little bit unrealistic, but yeah, it's sort of this vision of the whole of New Zealand being, organic and an organic production. It could become a bit of a powerhouse, I suspect, particularly because it would then put all of our farmers and growers out of the reach of, the things that do capture us in the conventional way. And GMOs is all part of that too, I believe. That's why organic people can see the folly of GMOs. I mean, the funny thing is that it'd probably be beneficial to us with organic businesses because the differential would get greater between conventional and organic in New Zealand. So we probably would stand to benefit, but we understand what it's trying to do. And so really on behalf of our conventional neighbours and stuff is why we're fighting against it in a funny kind of way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much to the panel, Willie, Rachel, and Jesiah. Just to wrap up, always grateful to our sponsors for the work we're doing on gene tech. We're in Wellington. OANZ is in Wellington end of month, early next month. And our next webinar, we're going to take a break over Easter. Our next webinar on the 9th of April will be sort of a report back on that and the work that we're doing. So the sponsorship and the commitment all our donors make help us do that and be more effective. Thank you very much for all that work. And thank you, Willie, Rachel, and Jesiah for sharing that today. Lots of chat, lots of good questions. And Lou, is there anything that you want to wrap up on before we depart?
I just want to touch on, as you know, most of you know, we're actually campaigning, we're fundraising at the moment for our GE Free Future campaign, which is an advocacy and education campaign. I've just put the link in the chat. If anyone's able to donate, or if you can just share with your networks, that would be great, because we really want to get some money in the door so we can continue with our pressure on the government campaign. Thank you. Thanks for coming, and I'll send the recording out in the chat.
Right. Ka kite anō. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks, panelists.